SCA. I'm also the founding partner of IVC, which is the fund that incubated YGG SCA along with YGG. On this call today, we have 4 of our investors in YGG SCA that comes from different parts of the crypto world. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and they can talk a little bit about them. So our first guest is Johnny Lee, head of Solana Games. Johnny?
Hi, y'all. I'm general manager of games at Solana, and we did a strategic partnership with YGGC.
Thank you. Next up is Brian Evans. Brian Evans is a crypto influencer and also writes for Forbes. Brian?
Hey guys, yeah, Inc. 500 entrepreneur. I've got a fund/venture studio called Reblock Ventures, and have quite a bit of followers on Twitter and other platforms. Launching my own game as well, and been in this space since 2016, writing for sites like Forbes and Inc. and Influenza and such.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, David. David has been part of the YGG family for a while, investing in all the subDAOs. So, David?
Pleasure to be with you, Brian. David Nage. I am a portfolio manager at Arca, which is an institutional asset manager. We've been around for almost 4 years. I currently run our venture capital fund called Endeavor, and it has been a pleasure getting to obviously support what we feel is the conduit to the next 100 million adopters of digital assets in the next few years via games and guilds.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, we have Wyatt from Circle Investments. Wyatt?
Very happy to be here. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I head up Circle Ventures. We're the corporate venture arm for Circle, which is a primary issuer of USDC. Yeah, I mean, we're investors in not only YGG Southeast Asia, but also Infinity Ventures Crypto, who incubated the project. We've co-invested with Brian and team many times. So super excited to be here, and thanks for having me. Great,
thank you guys. So let's talk about YGG SCA. All 4 of you guys have invested in us. All 4 of you guys have come from different parts of the crypto world. So I'm going to start off with Johnny from Solana Games, and wanted to have want to know why was YGG SCA why was a strategic partnership formed between us?
2 main things that we identified, similar to the Solana Games team. YGG SCA was a games native team, right? So myself come from the games industry almost 10 years. So that Evan, also from the games industry, Dan Wang, also from the games industry. Just through and through, it was a games industry native team that spoke to us. So it was very easy to begin working together seamlessly because we have a very deep understanding of the games industry. And then Southeast Asia as a whole, as a Web3 games region and its importance both on player side and the developer side was something that we were going to actively support. And we could not think of a better partner than YGG SCA.
Thank you, Johnny. So I'm sure you saw the announcement that just came out yesterday about another company that we just invested together. Mecha Fighting, Irreverent Labs, that just got announced. Sure. That was a big one. That one we just invested in that one together. I think we just closed and signed the documents last week. But that one is quite exciting. Brian, so you invested in YGG. This was before you decided to start your own gaming company and form your own gaming studio, yes. Alpha District. So can you talk a little bit about Alpha District and why YGG SCA was one of the first guilds that you called?
Yeah, definitely. I think as Johnny was saying too, and I think the region is super important. Southeast Asia, I'm very bullish on Southeast Asia. I've actually spent a decent amount of time there in Singapore and Thailand and other places, Philippines, and just really bullish on the region in general. Obviously, the people behind YGGC are bar none, the top of the industry. And just the number of games that are on the platform is obviously a big thing, plus the scholars. So I think the scholar model is really, it's important. And the number of scholars you guys are attracting and have attracted, plus the DAO model, it just made a really solid partnership on that side of things. So with our game as well, we'll have, you have this interesting thing in the industry. You have people owning NFTs. Like in our case, we'll have these NFTs that have to be sort of managed on the game. And you kind of busy people like yourselves, for example, might own these NFTs, but you really need the scholars to jump in some cases to help with this. So it's obviously a necessary problem to solve. And I think, I'm just really bullish on Southeast Asia in general, plus the team behind YGGC. So that was kind of the big draw. And I think you guys are going to I think it's going to be really successful.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. David, how's it going? So David, like I said earlier, he's been with the YGG family since the beginning. They are also, invested in Axie way in the early years before Axie was even onto the world. But David has in YGG. He invested in the first subDAO, YGG SCA. He also did YGG. So he's like family to us. So you guys all must have heard already about our IDO and about us halting our IDO and copper launch due to the market conditions. So, David, as an investor, you were one of the first people we called to ask for advice. Can you give us a little bit about your take and the advice that you were giving us?
Sure. What you're seeing right now is not all too dissimilar from what we've seen in past times. However, obviously the veracity and the velocity of it is different because you have more institutions involved in this asset class than ever before. And so I'm lucky as running a venture fund that we also have a fund that's been investing in the liquid side of digital assets now for over 3 years. And so I get to see a lot of the information flow and get to talk to our portfolio managers and our people on the desk to see what's happening from a market structure standpoint. And so from that standpoint, what we obviously have seen as regards to the activities relating to UST on the Terra Luna side of things has obviously created some market contraction over the last few days. And in that response, when eyeballs and when the velocity of that activity has obviously been kind of at the forefront, when you have a new issuance like an IDO, especially with YGGC, it can get lost in the shuffle when everyone's trying to figure out market direction and they're trying to figure out what exactly is happening from a standpoint of where this market is going up or down. It is not necessarily the best time in the world per se to have a new issuance come to market, as I said. And so I think at the end of the day, the way that we rationalize and the way that we think about guilds and games, as you alluded to, obviously, we were one of the first investors in Axie and have seen play-to-earn gaming and Web3 gaming really arrive on the scene over the last few years, is that this is an ownership economy that's being built. As opposed to what we've seen in past when you are an Uber driver or a Lyft driver or someplace around the world that is obviously a ride-sharing kind of application or platform, you typically don't own those cars. You're a part of a network, but you don't own that. You get paid for your services, but you don't have ownership. And whereas in the NFT gaming space, you actually have ownership of those assets. Or if you're obviously a scholar, you have the ability to use those assets and eventually have enough capital to buy them and own them yourself too. And so this is an ownership economy that's being built right in front of our eyes. And what I like to say is that as opposed to other parts of the internet, whether it's Web 1 or 2, a lot of what you're seeing today is being done in real time, but it's actually in a testing environment. We don't really realize that it's a testing environment, that we're in alpha and beta of this asset class, but we are. That a lot of these new paradigm shifts, a lot of these new economic systems that we're being built today are in forms of alpha and beta. And we're testing a lot of these things in real time. And so sometimes, unfortunately, when you're testing, and as any developer knows, you run into problems. You have obviously issues with code, you have bugs. And I think just the veracity and the interest in this asset class and digital assets over the last few years, especially in the onset of COVID, when we all started to look at new ways of living, either in quarantine or else, it has really kind of brought digital assets to the forefront much faster than a lot of us really anticipated. So this is all things that are happening in real time. And so, as I said, with all of those different layers of activity, all those layers of relative uncertainty, all of those layers of obviously volume and veracity, it was really a good time to take a pause, to really let the market settle. And then at a point in time, obviously enough market participants, hopefully see the value that YGGC is adding to the overall thesis of guilds and games in this world.
Thank you, David. I hope you guys out there understood most of the words that David was using. Some of our scholars are from Southeast Asia, and I don't know how well their English is, but we do have a pretty wide audience in the US and Europe. But I hope you guys out there understood what David was talking about. Next up, Wyatt. So USDC has been, and Circle and US has been a big supporter of IVC and YGG. You guys, being a stable coin, have seen the market conditions of what has happened today. Can you speak a little bit about the market conditions?
Yeah, I mean, USDC has I think a pretty steady thesis that we've been articulating for years around trust, compliance, transparency, and we will continue to stick with that until USDC is ubiquitous globally. As for market conditions, I mean, I think David nailed it. This happens. We move in cycles. COVID greatly accelerated digital asset adoption. It created all these new economic models like play to earn, and all these things are being battle tested in real time. That said, if we're all taking a long-term approach like we do at Circle Ventures, we take the venture capital 5 to 10 year outlook. This is just a blip, and we go back to work. And I don't think right now, at least from what we're seeing, I'm curious to hear what you all are seeing. I'm not seeing any slowdown in the early stage venture market. Really haven't seen valuations compress too much. I wrote a tweet about this the other day, but I think you might see some sort of compression. But right now, there's just this massive talent inflow coming into crypto, and you have tons of funds who have previously raised billions of dollars. So there's lots of dry powder. It's a great time to build. If you look at 2018, the companies and protocols that emerged from that, if you even look at platforms like CoinList, the returns that they generated through that period are frankly incredible. So maybe we're coming to the end of an incredible bull market, but I don't know. These bear markets tend to get shorter and shorter, and then we're kind of right back to business. And we've also kind of been in this for some time, right? This started in November, so it's not like it's new. It's just there's a very sharp decline as a result of certain actions that were taken in the market. But for those of us that are kind of in venture and early stage startups, which the majority of this space is, it's just a fun thing to watch on Twitter and we get back to work.
If I can add to that, Brian, and just to kind of hit on what Wyatt was saying there, he's absolutely correct. Last year in venture, there was roughly about $33 billion that was invested into companies. Last year alone, it was the highest amount in terms of deployment ever in the space. Q1 of this year was a continuance of that. You saw incredible strength quarter over quarter in terms of the amount of capital that was put to work into companies in this space. And to Wyatt's also point about the amount of capital that's been raised, there are more multi-billion-dollar funds in digital assets than ever before. And I say that ever before. You never had a billion-dollar fund in 2018 during crypto winter. You didn't have that. Now you have more than a dozen out there that have the type of capital to be able to put to work. And so all of that means, as Wyatt alluded to, is that if you're a founder in the space or you're a founder in Web 2 and you have ideas on how to potentially look at DeFi primitives, to look at GameFi, in a different way to create value, to create platforms that people will love to use, this is a great time to come into this space and to potentially be a founder right now.
Thank you, David. So Johnny, you were saying that you've been in gaming for your whole life, for almost a decade. So you're one of those gamers that ended up coming into the Web3 world and now investing into the Web3 games, or even I saw about you guys investing in Web2 companies that are entering the Web3 market. Can you speak a little bit about the investments that Solana is making into the space within the Web2 space, or Web2 companies that are trying to enter into the Web3 space?
Sure. I think most of the folks on the call are correct in that this is a great time to build, right? And we are seeing all types of developers, come into the Web3 gaming space, and it's exciting. It's both on a pipeline of Web2 game companies moving into our space, Web2 established founders moving into our space, spinning up a new studio, and even the big brand name devs that you would recognize also moving into that space. And so we support with different types of packages of support and all those kind of tiers.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. So Brian, you were talking about your game a little bit. You were talking about Alpha District, but you didn't get to speak about it. When you first talked to our head of investments, Chief Investment Officer, Dan, he got it right away. He was so bullish about your game. He came back and he said, we have to do this game. Can you give us a little bit and tell us a little bit about what Alpha District is?
Yeah, for sure. And we're kind of still in stealth mode, but I'll give a little teaser. If you guys,
sorry about that.
No, it's okay. If you guys ever played the old Hitman games or the old Myst games, it's kind of a throwback to Hitman meets Myst. And there's a little bit of Grand Theft Auto in there for the crazy guys. So it's a really interesting game. There's an interesting dynamic between, it's player versus player. It's a very interesting dynamic, progressing your NFTs, and I'll kind of just leave it at that. But it's a whole universe. Alpha District's a whole universe, but there's a core game that's being launched with that has this really interesting player versus player dynamic. That's something we haven't seen in the space yet. So we're really trying to, what I've seen in the space is, like, I'm a gamer too. Like I've been playing games literally my whole life. I learned everything about life through video games, honestly. And I really advocate video games in many ways for everybody. I think there's so what we're really trying to do with Alpha District is not just have a random game that you just play, but really have a game that's really focused on brain teasers and a point to playing it. And being a fun game as well. So we really want to we have a really solid team with some really serious game developers that have worked on games that you guys have all heard of. We'll be talking about that very soon publicly, but we're bringing a really serious game to the space. So we're excited for it for sure. But really, it's a throwback to real gamers that really want to, I think we're seeing that more and more in the space. We're seeing real games come into the space now. We have real games, but we're seeing more and more real games coming into the space and benefiting from this P2E model. So it's not to diss any of the current games in the space. It's really just that I think we're doing something new and innovative, but and there's lots of others doing some really great games as well. So,
no, we totally agree. When Dan came back, he's like, I haven't seen anything like this. We have to do it. So Wyatt will make the introduction. Johnny will make the introduction after this. I'll throw you guys all in the group chat.
Nice.
So David, you've been a huge supporter of the YGG family since the beginning. Can you speak a little bit about why you and your firm believe in the YGG statement or the YGG narrative?
Absolutely. Essentially, it comes down to what YGG's function is. And if you do believe that play-to-earn gaming, Web3 gaming is going to be a significant paradigm, whereas we have 3 billion gamers around the world who are at the effective stake of large corporations who have all of these assets in games that they know that they don't have as ownership. If you believe that there is going to be a shift in that paradigm, whereas you now have ownership, you now have the ability to play a game and derive some economic value from it. You also have the ability to potentially be voting on the improvements in that game in real time with the developers, unlike what you have, in Web 2 gaming. If you believe all those things to be true, and you believe that Web 3 player-owned gaming is going to be a next paradigm shift, what you have to understand is then that the NFTs in those games typically have market prices because, again, there's a scarcity level. There are not infinite amounts of those NFTs in those games. And so for the ability of those that potentially do not have the economic means to potentially speculate on NFT price accretion or increased value over time, but simply want to be able to play a game and be able to potentially earn some economic value to help their family perhaps, a guild, especially YGG, YGGC, or OLAGG, have the ability to be that conduit, to be that bridge. Whereas I said, again, you have a game, you can earn assets, you can earn income from that potentially. And these guilds give those that do not have the economic means to be able to participate in those, to be able to do that. What's also special about YGG, and especially the subDAOs of YGG, is that they are specified for different cultures. Whereas in Korea, they may have a completely different cultural norm, and I know they do, than, say, potentially Argentina. Obviously, there are people there that are gamers that play Call of Duty, that play World of Warcraft, and all the other games out there that have been around for years. But they do have different cultural differences. What they like, what they are obviously have an aptitude for, what they find pleasure from, what they actually do not like. And so the subDAOs are incredibly important because they are boots on the ground that work with those gamers in those regions to be able to educate them and be able to help them in their journey of being able to participate in this new ownership economy that is arriving from player-owned gaming. And so that is why YGG and the subDAOs are incredibly important, in my opinion, is that they are that connective tissue, that bridge between what is being built of all these new Web3 games to all of the people around the world that potentially may not know about them and may not be able to necessarily participate in them right off the bat. They give them an opportunity to be on par with those that would otherwise they would not be able to.
Well, thank you, David. Wyatt, so we have invested in several companies together. A lot of them have to do with the, I guess you could say, the ecosystem of play to earn, especially one that both YGG and IVC invested in, which is XLD, where we help our scholars that earn the tokens to be able to spend it directly from the native game token into everyday utility bills, school bills. We have something like 10,000 merchants that they can spend it on. Can you speak a little bit about the penetration of USDC into the Southeast Asia region?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you need utility on both sides, right? And I think that's what we found really interesting about XLD, is that it's working with these guilds, working with these games, and trying to find ways to allow them to take native tokens, exchange them for a local currency, and kind of provide the on and off ramps, as well as some sort of stable coin that is collateralized with USDC and other assets. For us, and I think where Circle and USDC are coming in here, it's kind of that like Web 2.5 bridge. So if anyone here in the audience uses or plays like NBA Top Shot and collects those Top Shot moments, you're able to pay with a credit card. You're able to set up a wallet without really even knowing what a wallet is. You could also transact in USDC. So it's a really interesting and seamless way to onboard new users. And I think that's kind of what Play to Earn has also been, as David suggested. It's that conduit of bringing new people in, rewarding them with crypto, and then starting to allow them to experiment. And a lot of this is just an experiment right now. It's a phenomenal customer acquisition strategy, and we're experimenting with ways to provide long-term sustainability to all these Play to Earn participants. But But for us, I think we supply that kind of suite of APIs and technology to allow you to interact with somebody kind of in the Web 2 format. And we want to invest in plenty of companies that are figuring out unique ways like XLD of providing that kind of last mile connectivity, regardless of the country they're in. So we're looking at similar investments in Latin America, Africa.
46, yeah.
Yeah. That's another great example of kind of true last mile on the ground delivery, which is cheesy to say, but kind of meeting the customer where they are, right? Like we are so accustomed to ATM and mobile payments and things like that. Like each country has a unique way of interacting there. So I think XLD is a prime example of kind of that missing step that you need in order to make this whole economy work. And that's something we're really excited about. Great.
Thank you, Wyatt. So Wyatt was talking about tools. Johnny earlier was also talking about tools that, as a part of Solana Games, what kind of tools does Solana offer to a lot of these new play-to-earn games that are coming out? Can you speak a little bit about what you guys are offering to the community?
Yeah, building in particular for game devs or all Web3 products, building on Solana we think will accelerate you down the dev roadmap, because there's a lot of open source tooling that has been generated from projects before you, and that's the advantage of like building on a global single shared state of Solana. And so like game developers, we have, for example, like an onboarding doc that could guide them through that. And of course, our product engineering team is there for support. And in reality, for the current state of Web3 games, our open source tooling available for game devs will allow the far majority of games to get to launch without much custom coding on Solana. So that's what we're really excited about. And also, even from other verticals like in payments and NFTs and so forth are relevant in games. So those product verticals or companies and products that have come from those verticals have open source tooling that game devs on Solana can take full advantage of.
No, that's amazing. Thank you, Johnny. Brian, so not many people out there know what CT is, or crypto Twitter.
Sure.
You've been in space for a long time, and everyone talks. I mean, Twitter is where all the crypto people go.
Absolutely.
They write their tweet. And you were able following of close to 1 million. I don't know if you're over 1 million, but I know you were very close to 1 million.
Right about there, yeah.
Right about there, which is amazing, because most of the CT, crypto Twitters, influencers that we see, I rarely see anybody that's in that 1 million follower. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got there, and just your whole view on CT, because everyone talks about how toxic it is sometimes.
Yeah. Look, I've been on Twitter since before Twitter was cool. I think I signed up in 2009. So I've been on there. I was just bullish about it from early on. Actually, before I even got into crypto, I was on Twitter. I had a publication called Influensive. It's kind of like a young Forbes type site. I was writing for all these sites, so I was getting a lot of credibility, I think, from writing for the Forbes type sites early on about crypto, and when they thought Ethereum and Bitcoin were, viruses or whatever they thought. I think what's important on Twitter is like, it's really not about the number, right? The 1 million is like, that's almost, to me, that's irrelevant. What you really want to focus on, and it's good, don't get me wrong, but what you really want is your 1,000 true fans. It's a concept that goes back ages that says if you have 1,000 true fans that really die hard believe in what you're doing, you can turn that into a massive business, much bigger exponential audience, and things like that. So I think what people miss sometimes in the crypto space is they really go for those numbers, which is deceiving, because you see the Gary V's and you see the other people out there with all these massive numbers, and you say, I got to get the big numbers. And really that's the wrong goal. You really should say, how do I get 1,000 die-hard people that will bend over backwards, join every live stream we're doing, buy all my stuff, support each other, but also giving value back to those people. So I always flip the goal on people. I say, don't think about the 1 million followers. Think about your 1,000 really important true fans that'll just do anything and everything. and make sure you're giving them, as much value as possible. And it kind of goes both ways, right? So yeah, I think about it from that perspective. But yeah, it can be a toxic place for sure. And I think you have to tune that out. You're always going to get someone. You can post good morning, and somebody will say, well, it's not a good morning for me. And it's a fact of life. You have to understand that people are going through their own things, and it's not about you. They're not actually calling you out per se. Sometimes they are. It's sometimes can be about them and what they're going through in life. So you have to have some patience and kind of perspective that the people are going through difficult times, especially in certain countries where life is very, very difficult compared to probably what the people on this stage are used to. So, it's really just, I guess it's understanding marketing in that sense, where you're always going to have that balance of people that you're talking to on a global audience. So,
yeah, I've joined Twitter just this year, and I just passed 1,000 followers on mine. And I think when I post something, I only get like 5 likes or 6 likes.
And it's tough. Look, it's kind of, and no disrespect to Twitter, but it's kind of turning a little bit into Instagram in the days of where, even with my following, not everybody sees the tweets sometimes, right? So it's kind of, it's still interesting. And who knows what's going to happen with Elon coming in. I hope he decentralizes, to be honest. I really do hope he does that. I don't know if he will or not, but I hope he goes the decentralization route. That would be very interesting. I think, he's got a lot of audience in the crypto space, right? So he very well could turn this thing into a DAO or, decentralized in some capacity. They'll still need somebody kind of policing it because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens on Twitter. But I really hope he does decentralize in some way.
Wow. Great thoughts. So David, you have a podcast that people have said is one of the best podcasts in the industry. You've been doing it for several years already. You had the founder of Solana on there as one of your first guests. You've had Gabby. You've had my other co-founders at YGG on there. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with this podcast of yours and what it's like?
It's called Base Layer. I launched Base Layer in the last quarter of 2018, which obviously, dates me a little bit. I've been around a few years before that. And I did it because so many people out there, and as Brian was alluding to in terms of crypto Twitter, in terms of what you see on social media and the news, so many people, if you believe what you read and you obviously see, that they think that this is all a scam, that they think there's obviously Ponzi's here, that they think that there's fraud in this world. Now, obviously, in any new technology, if you've looked back into the history of technologies out there, you see that, unfortunately, some of the worst people in the world take advantage of new technologies right away. I always like to hark back that I read at one point some of the first few purchasers of the automobile were bank robbers because they were able to get away faster. And so, lo and behold, obviously now, billions of people have cars, and obviously they're not all bank robbers. And so, with Base Layer, it was an opportunity to bring people like Anatoly, obviously co-founder of Solana, to bring Sam Bankman-Fried on before it was really FTX. It was still Alameda, and he was still obviously building that out. To bring people like Gabby on to show that there was real building here, that there was real foundation, that these people had a long journey to get here, that it wasn't all of a sudden, hey, let's get into crypto. It's, 10, 15 years of prior work, either in technology or in finance, that they derived the idea that this is the place where the future is going to be built. And so for people to hear that, and for people to have that as a library of recordings, I thought that was incredibly important, as there's always new interest. There are obviously people that are looking at this world every single day and trying to learn. And so that was really the journey I took with this, is that it would be a living library of some of the smartest investors and builders in this space to tell people how they got here and what they were trying to build and the difficulties. This is not easy stuff. Obviously as an investor, this is not easy, but also as a founder, this is not easy. because there's a lot of volatility, and it's not just price volatility, but it's also technology volatility. And so that's really why I built, I started the podcast, 3+ years ago. And it's been amazing to be able to spend time with founders, hear about their journeys, learn about why they built what they built. And anybody who wants to listen to it, it's widely available, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Great. Thank you, David. And yeah, YGG Main and our YGG subDAO have been guests on a base layer. So if you guys want to listen to our podcast on there, please sign up. So, Wyatt, I'm going to take a different turn here with you. And, with stable coins being, everyone's trying to do a stable coin. Everyone's trying to do some type of stable coin business in all parts of the world. Even with XLD, with Pago 46, they're trying to build some sort of stable coin that's within their own ecosystem. Do you think that regulations are going to come into the stablecoin industry anytime soon? Because it is becoming extremely mainstream.
Yeah,
and we
very
see
much
the
so.
factors.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that. Just speaking with our portfolio and a number of prospective companies, maybe up until yesterday, a lot of people were thinking about incorporating a stablecoin into their project. Maybe it's not going to be as hot now, but I think crypto goes through these narratives, and I think everyone thought, and in many ways, this year has been kind of the year of the DAO. Maybe it's been a little bit slower than we expected, but numbers are picking up. We just invested into Syndicate, which is a Web3 investment club platform, and you can see their numbers are absolutely taking off. But I think thus far, I think 2022 has been, the year of the stablecoin, and it's a really interesting theme. But ultimately, yes, we do think regulation will come, and we think it's close. What that looks like, we will see. I would highly recommend everyone check out Jeremy Allaire, CEO's podcast. He just did a recent episode with Dante Disparte, who's the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Policy at Circle. You can hear their thoughts. They're way more in the weeds in Washington than I am. But we're excited about regulation because we think it's just going to legitimize USDC and what we're doing, which is, I think, ultimately going to just open doors to real world applications. So USDC really got its first foothold in DeFi. One of the reasons we're excited about GameFi is to kind of maybe see the next wave of that. But you think about real world payments. I mean, Johnny, I know your team at Solana Pay is hard at work in this. These are huge categories. Our most recent fundraising round was with BlackRock and Fidelity. I mean, if you see traditional financial institutions start to adopt this stuff, again, huge market opportunities. Then you look at spaces like commercial lending and others. I mean, these are $1 trillion markets, and USDC is about 50 billion today. So I think we're just in the first inning of this stuff. But ultimately, though, again, kind of coming back to what I was saying before, being able to be that trustworthy, compliant, transparent, and regulatory approved stablecoin, we think is going to be absolutely critical in the widespread adoption of USDC, both here in the United States and abroad. And we're currently expanding into areas like Europe and Singapore, and more into the Asian markets as well. So we're just getting started, but I think we might see something this year.
And IVC will be with you every step of the way in Asia, hopefully.
Absolutely.
So, we're almost out of time here, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about YGG SCA, and everyone is a little bit upset with us right now. We see it on our Discord, we see it on our Twitter, but guys, we really needed to protect our investors. It's something that we put out there and said that the market is just not ready for an IDO during this time right now. There was just no buying on the copper launch, and everyone is just in the wait and see mode. But guys, YGG SCA, we have a very, very strong team, and we have very, very strong fundamentals. We have 11,000 scholarships. We're the largest subDAO of YGG. We're the only guild in the world that has offered 10 games that our scholars can pick from. And I don't think there's any other guild out there that can say that they're offering 10 different games to the community. YGG SCA operates in Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and we're opening up 2 other Southeast Asian countries in Q3. So it's just the beginning for us. We are growing really big. We have invested in 76 games already, and we have only launched 10 of them. So we're ready for the rest of the year. We're ready for the bear market. Everyone says that GameFi will be thriving during the bear market. And I'm going to leave that last statement for the group and everyone here to talk about. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. Everyone says that during the bear market, probably GameFis and games will be one of the thriving industries. And I just want to know, what are your thoughts on that? Johnny?
Yeah, games are an important part of what we're seeing activity-wise, especially from the developers on the Solana POV, and we agree generally that YGGC is well positioned in a very, very important region, and we look forward to continuing to build and work together.
Great, thank you, Johnny. Brian?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, well, first and foremost, it's like games are supposed to be fun, right? So especially in a bear market, if you can also, for scholars especially, earn some money, there's other reasons to play besides that, but it's supposed to be fun. So like, I don't know, personally, sometimes if I don't have an actual game to play, I'll play some chess or something like that, just as like a, people do sports or whatever, but if you're kind of stuck behind the screen, it can be a nice break from your regular job, even if you're just doing it at lunch real quick. So I think we have to remember that games are supposed to be fun. So especially if you're kind of people get emotional in bear markets, and it's just a fact of life. So you want to look at these people starting new hobbies. They do other things on top of building their companies and doing their jobs. So I think it can be obviously games can be fun, right? So we embrace from that perspective, I guess. So.
David?
If you look at the history of games over the last 40 plus years, you had Pong back in the early 70s was one of the breakouts. Then you had the Atari 2600, and then you had Nintendo coming in with the NES, and then obviously you had the PlayStation wars or the Xbox wars. And you've seen from all of those periods of time, you've seen recessionary periods. You've seen, obviously, the financial crisis of 2008-9. You've seen, obviously, a global pandemic. But games and gamers continue on because, as Brian alluded to, it's a escape. It's supposed to be fun. And what's beautiful about Web3 play-to-earn gaming is that it can be fun, and then you can also earn some extra assets on the side. And you also can, actually start to have ownership of some of these assets that could have future value. And so not only is it fun, but there's also an economic upside. And so games throughout the last 40 plus years have been able to thrive and be able to grow massive audience to the point where now those that are listening, you are part of a group of 3 billion gamers around the world who play almost on a regular basis. And what's going to happen over the course of the next few months and the next year is that with Web3 gaming, you're going to start to see more integration with mobile. You're going to be able to use your mobile device to start playing these games. And what also is going to happen is that a lot of the past issues that have happened with either past games that have obviously had to learn and pivot and change, all of that learning, all of those mistakes are going to be adapted into new games, and they're going to be made better, and they're going to be made more fun and enjoyable. So all of these things are happening in real time. As I said earlier today, all of these things are happening in real time, and you, the ones that are listening, are the benefactor of all of that.
Great. Thank you, David. Last one, Riot, wrapping it up.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this before, but I think this is just like the early innings for play to earn in blockchain gaming. And I think sometimes we have to separate ourselves from market conditions and kind of look to the future. And I think this is a really exciting time. The fact that you have all these people on this call, all these amazing organizations and funds like FTX as well that are heavily investing in this space. I think this is only going to get bigger and better. So, unfortunate conditions now, but again, this is probably just a kind of a blip on the radar, even if we're in a bear market for the next year or so. As Brian said, 10 games, you've got 60 something in the backlog. It's just incredible the amount of work that's going in here. So we're really excited, and I think it's going to be a wonderful couple of years.
Great. No, guys, I really appreciate your time early morning for all of you guys, especially Brian all the way out in LA. So thank you guys very much for joining me on this live stream.
Thanks
All
for
right.
having me. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.